Welcome on into the Detroit Lions News Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Chap. I'm alone today, so we're going to be going through a brief show. Obviously, we're going to go through bets. We're going to go through some of the statistics and everything like that. Bring you to everything about the Detroit Lions Minnesota Vikings game because this is a huge game in the NFC North, in the NFC as a whole, and in the NFL. So we're going to get to it all in this podcast. When we talk about this game against the Minnesota Vikings, we all talk about Aiden Hutchinson. Obviously, the loss of Aiden Hutchinson, that isn't going to obviously help the cause. But the one thing I can say about the losing Aiden Hutchinson is, well, this is a good time for Aaron Glenn to scheme up some things because he actually has a really good defense all around. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about bets. If you are new to the show, if you're watching on the Facebook, the Twitter, you can do a comment. It'll come on here. Twitter, it's a little bit hard. I have Twitter up, so if you have a comment on Twitter, you can go on Twitter and I'll respond to your comment. But this is going to be a good show. So we're gonna get going right now. Obviously, we're gonna talk about bets. We're gonna talk about statistics. We're gonna talk about how these two teams look in conjunction. But this is a lot of stuff we're gonna go through. I forgot a little bit of slides, but we'll get through it. But if you're not gonna watch the whole podcast, you can go download on Spotify or Apple. You can follow the podcast. So if you're ever away from the computer, if you're ever away from your phone, you can go download the podcast and watch it on at your convenience. So we're going to talk about this game and let's go. So the betting markets, Detroit's a 1.5 point favorite. So I mean 1 point there, 1.5 underdog. My bad, totally messed up. This one says minus 100 right now. If you go on FanDuel, it's plus 108 for Detroit. So that's a little bit of juice for you to put in a parlay, maybe potentially. There's no juice on the over or under. It's kind of sporadic on both of them. But if you're gonna hit the Detroit Lions spread of 1.5, you're better off hitting the money line because it's plus 108 on the money line. The odds have changed so far, and plus 1.5 is still 110. So if you want to get a good juice to your parlay or whatever you're putting together, go put the money line on there. There's a couple of things that we're going to look at with the betting markets. That's something that we're going to be looking at. But if you want to look at like parlays, if you want to look at player passing yards, obviously right now Sam Darnold is 259.5. Jared Goff is 252.5. If you were to ask me right now, Sam Darnold has hit 8 of his 12 games on the under. So if you want to go hit the under, you can. Jared Goff has hit on, I believe, let me pull this up. Jared Goff has hit on, he's hit on the over at 252.5. Two of the last 2 games, 4 of the last 4 games for Minnesota, and he's hit on 4 of his last 5 away games. And Minnesota ranks 30th in pass yards against. So if you want to go hit the passing yards, you can do that as well. That's a good bet right there. I think that's a very solid bet if you want to put that together. For passing, TDs, Jared Goff has gone over 1.5, 3 of his last 3 games. He's hit in 2 of his last 3 against Minnesota and 2 of his last 2 on the road in total. It's an interesting thing when you look at the betting markets and you look at how they perceive some of these things, especially in the betting markets with the over-unders. We're going to look at receiving yards. And right now, if you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown's receiving yards, it is at 72.5 receiving yards. He's hit this in 15 of his last 20 games, 2 of his last 2 games against Minnesota, 4 of his last 5 away games. And again, Minnesota ranks 30th in the pass. If you want Sam Laporta in your parlay, he's hit in 2 of the last 2 games, hit on 3 of the last 4 away games. Obviously, Minnesota ranks 30th in the pass. He's hit on that pretty well, 100% in 2 of the last 2 games, and 3 of the last 4 away games. He's at 75%. So that's something to look at too. There's a couple of bets that are a little bit underrated in terms of the way that they're perceived. Dave Montgomery has hit on 6 of his last 8 games at 9.5 receiving yards, and 12 of his last 18 away games, 67%, 75%. So you get a good juice on there. Gibbs, 19.5 receiving yards. He's hit on 4 of the last 5 games and 2 of the last 2 away games. So that's interesting. Here's Justin Jefferson. If you want to put a Minnesota player in your parlay, 3 of the last 3 games versus Detroit, he's 100%, and he's 2 of his last 3 um, home games. So 67%, 100%. He's doing a really good job at what he's been able to do at home. Sam Darnold's been able to feed him the ball. We know that TJ Hockenson, if we look at the injury report, TJ Hockenson looks like he's not going to play. He's a questionable. Patrick Jones is questionable for the Minnesota Vikings. Aaron Jones is questionable. Harrison Phillips is questionable. And Dalton Risner is questionable as well. Out is Blake Coleman and Caleb Evans. And for Detroit, only player that's out right now is obviously Hutch, but Christian Mahogany, which he has an illness. Carlton Davis is questionable, but he told Dave Burkett of the Free Press that he will be playing. So that's good. And questionable is obviously Kevin Zeitler as well. So Kevin Zeitler is obviously questionable. So when you put in I don't really think that they're going to suffer a major drop in play missing Kevin Zeitler. I think Coyote Oshika did a damn good job at the last time he played. So that'll be interesting. But let's get back to some of the bets that are out there. Rushing yards. If you like the rushing yards, I know a lot of people do. 51.5. The interesting thing about that, if you're going to be very specific, Dave Montgomery has hit that 8 of the last 8 away games. He's 13 of his last 17 games, which is 78%. So he's a really good barometer. Jahmyr Gibbs, if you want to hit the 51.5, he's also at 51.5. He's hit in 4 of the last 4 games and in the last 2 away games. So if you want to hit that as well, you can. And then there's an underlying play that a lot of people don't talk about because Jared Goff isn't really a scrambler, but over 1.5 rushing yards. He's hit 4 of the last 5 games at 80%, and he's hit 2 of the last 2 away games at 100%. So if you think he's gonna run the ball at a pace, you're gonna see that what that's gonna happen. So again, when I look at this game, I look at some of the parlay things, and I look at the popular, and a lot of people have anytime touchdowns for St. Brown, Dave Montgomery, Jefferson, and JMO. So that's one of the hottest parlays out there. You can go get that. $10 wins you $293 if you want to put that on there. But if you're gonna take the money, if you're gonna bet just the spread or the money line, I would really perhaps just hit the money line because it's more juice. The spread is at -110. The money line is at plus 108. So you're gonna get a little more bang for your buck hitting in the money line. So let's go into obviously the injury report. We talked about it in some of our talk about the betting, but we just went over it. Obviously questionable. You got a lot of Hockenson, Patrick Jones, Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones being questionable is pretty huge. Harrison Phillips and Dalton Risner, their starting guard for Detroit. They're relatively healthy. You got out is Christian Mahogany, cornerback Carlton Davis. He's questionable, and so is Kevin Zeitler. We hear Kevin Zeitler might not be able to play, but like I said, when you talk about the chance that Kevin Zeitler can't play, I'm really confident in Coyote Oshika to kind of take over. He did really good in the last game that he played against Seattle. I think he could do really good against Minnesota as well. He's really blossomed into a great depth piece for the Detroit Lions. When you think about it, you love to see guys who offer some good depth, right? And Coyote Oshika stepped in the NFC Championship game. So that tells you everything you know about Coyote Oshika. He's a really good player, really talented player, very underrated. This is another Hank Fraley development curve kind of guy, and he's done a really good job. But that's interesting. Now, when we talk about Sam Darnold, we talk about pressure. This is the most interesting thing. This is Sam Darnold versus no blitz. He has an 87.6 passer rating, which is 20th in the NFL. 0.8 interceptions a game, which is second most in the NFL when he's not facing a blitz. 6.7 yards per attempt, which is 22nd in the NFL versus no blitz. And then 61.7 completion percentage, which is 31st in the NFL, which makes no damn sense. EPA per dropback, he's 28th in the league with a negative 0.18. Quarterback pressure percentage, 36.8. He has a 5th most sacks, the 2nd most average separation, 2nd most. And Sam Darnold has thrown an interception 4 of the 5 games this season. Lions defense has forced 7 interceptions this season, including an interception all 5 games. And if you're talking about what could be the deciding factor of Sunday's game, it's pretty clear the deciding factor could be turnovers. And when you look at the way that Sam Darnold has played, the way that Detroit Lions defense has played, it's a very interesting dynamic in terms of who has the edge there. Because when I look at the Detroit Lions defense, when we look at the two safeties, we all know that Hutchinson's out. We all know he's out. But overall, Branch and the two safeties that they have in the back, Branch and Joseph, ranked top two in ball hawk rate this season, i.e., the percentage of targets faced in which the defender made a play on the ball, pass defense, or interception. They're doing a damn good job. Kirby Joseph, I think there was a stat out there that he had 4 interceptions in the end zone. These two guys right here, Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph, what they're going to be able to do is, yes, you might not be able to get the same pass rush that you had, but when I look at these two guys, I look at them for what it is. Every quarterback that's going to go play the Detroit Lions, every quarterback that's going to look across the field and go over the middle has to understand that they are going to be in a world of hurt if they just throw a ball measly over the middle. Because Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph have shown that they could be really good playmakers in the middle of the field. They're ball hawks. They do a lot of good things. Kirby Joseph has blossomed into one of the better ball hawking safeties in the NFL. And there was a guy out there that put out there a comparison between Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas and Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch, and the statistics were very similar. In terms of the way they defend the balls that were defended, interceptions, all that jazz. And when you got guys like that, Hutch will definitely hurt. Missing Hutch will definitely hurt. But when you have guys like Brian Branch, when you have guys like Kirby Joseph, when you have guys like Terrion Arnold, who I think is getting better as the weeks go on, and as you got Carlton Davis, who has done a pretty damn good job, I feel like a lot of the pass yards that's shown, in the statistics, I feel like it's overinflated, because when you can't run the ball against Detroit, which is something that we're going to have to monitor, can teams run the ball with Hutch out? But if you can't run the ball against Detroit, you have to pass the ball to move the ball. And that's just the way it is. And that's the way football goes. You're going to have to pick your poison. You're really going to have to pick your poison. And unfortunately for Detroit, they're not going to have Hutchinson for the rest of the year until they get to the Super Bowl, which I highly doubt. But you got a guy in Lee McNeil who, he 6th best interior defensive line grade in Pro Football Focus. He was just locked up for, 4 years, $97 million, 55 guaranteed. You got to imagine that he's going to come out there and play his best ball, because that's what's expected. And whoever comes along in the trade or whatever, I mean, that's going to be the most interesting part. But what I do like about Detroit is they're not really going to be desperate. I feel like with the Hutchinson injury, a lot of people wanted to make a trade this week. I don't believe that. If you go out and win this week, and then you go out and win against Tennessee Titans, and then you go play Green Bay and you win that game, or you lose a tight one, teams are going to be going to Detroit and going, okay, we've seen how you played the last couple weeks. You're obviously not desperate. Brad Holmes can go to the bargaining table without being desperate. And that's the one thing that will really set him apart with these two teams, with the way that he's putting together this roster. Because he's going to have to do something, especially with, he's going to get a chance to see James Houston and Isaiah Thomas and Awuku and Josh Pascal all by themselves. It's going to be very, very interesting how he puts his team together and how they do that, because when you talk about it, this team has just been decimated with injuries along the front seven. When you think about losing John Kaminsky in training camp, when you think about losing Marcus Davenport a couple weeks ago, Derek Barnes a couple weeks ago, and then he put in Aiden Hutchinson, has been lost for a season. It's not a very good sight for the Detroit Lions. Obviously, they were hoping to stay more healthy, especially along that front seven, but good for Brad Holmes that he has the cap room to make a move if he decides to do so, which I assume he will. He's just not going to make it this week, and I doubt he makes it next week. I think he's going to make it closer to trade deadline, because pressure is going to make these teams do what they want to do. So that's going to be interesting. All right. So we talked about the defense. Let's talk about the offense. This is a couple of things I want to go over really quick. You got Jahmyr Gibbs and Dave Montgomery. They rank 3rd and 4th respectively in rush success rate. on runs from under center behind only Bijan Robinson, who's at 57.1, and Kyron Williams is at 55.2, minimum 25 carries. The matchup here is the Vikings defense has allowed the second lowest rush success rate, despite having recorded the fifth highest missed tackle rate, which is a 31.4% against under center runs this year. And when you think about that stat in particular, and then you look at the schedule that the Minnesota Vikings have played, it's not, this isn't really shown how good they've been specifically with the run, because when you look at their schedule, like if you just go look at it, like I'm gonna pull it up right now, but when you go look at it, like they play Devin Singletary and the Giants. The Giants can't run the ball. Let's be honestly here. They can't run the ball to save their lives. So then you go to the game where they played the 49ers. Well, unfortunately, 49ers did not have Christian McCaffrey. So there again you go, where you got a guy, Jordan Mason, who's done a damn good job, but he's not the same as Christian McCaffrey. And in that game against the 49ers, they allowed 102 yards rushing. It wasn't the best rushing game for the 49ers, obviously. They play the Texans. The Texans have I think Joe Mixon was hurt that game. So again, they're playing a backup running back. They play the Packers. That was the one game I believe that they got torched on the ground. Yeah. Well, no, 86 yards, which was my thing about Josh Jacobs. He's not really a good running back, but it is what it is. Josh Jacobs had 51 yards, a 5.7 yard carry. But you got to remember, the Packers fell behind pretty early, and they had to play some catch up. And then you look at the following game that they just played. It was the Jets and the Vikings, and we all know what the Jets' issues are. The Jets have a lot of issues, and it's not just conjunction to the run game. Their offensive line does suck, and their quarterback is old. So the schedule hasn't really been daunting for the Minnesota Vikings. Over the next couple weeks, it gets a little more. Well, it doesn't get a little more easy for the Vikings. I mean, they play the Rams on Thursday Night Football, the Colts on Sunday, the Jaguars on. Then they play the Titans. Then they play the Bears, the Cardinals. They really don't play any good teams until the last portion of their schedule, which sets up good for Detroit. But this really means that Detroit needs to go out and win this game, because when you look at their schedule, they don't play a winning team until the Bears game, which is around Thanksgiving. So when you think about that, this game is precisely probably a must win for Detroit, because Detroit has a tougher schedule. There's no doubt about it. But when you talk about the Vikings, like they play some horrible teams. They play the Rams, the Colts, the Jags, the Titans. Then they play the Bears. So they got some gimmies in there that they should be able to take care of. But overall, it's going to be interesting. But Goff, let's talk about Jared Goff. Jared Goff, he's averaged a league high 10.7 yards per attempt. Went under pressure this season, the most by a qualified passer in a season since 2018, and more than one full yard than the next closest passer, 2019 Ryan Tannehill, which was really good. The Vikings have played split safety coverage on a league high 56.1 of their blitzes this season, nearly 40% above the league average rate, which was 17.5. Jared Goff completed 7 of 9 passes for 154 yards and a touchdown on 9 dropbacks versus split safety coverage in 2 combined meetings with the Vikings last season, was 17.1 yards per attempt. So the split high safety really opens up a JMO game. And if you look at the betting markets right now, JMO is his over under for the game is 47.5. JMO has hit 47.5 a couple times this year because he's had some long receptions. But if you're looking at a person that could potentially make this game ironically different, it's JMO, because what they're going to do is, if they're going to do they're going to play high safeties, split coverage, they're going to allow a lot of stuff over the middle. Obviously, if they start blitzing, which Brian Flores does a lot, they'll be able to pick their poison. And then you're going to make it a shootout game with Jared Goff or Sam Darnold. I'm going to be honest, I feel more confident with Jared Goff than Sam Darnold. That's obvious, but it'll be interesting. But yeah, even the guys that there's a guy on this over under list that I think is going to play a key role in this too is Tim Patrick. He's at 21.5 receiving yards over under. It's minus 113. So if you wanted to add that into your parlay, it's a pretty good parlay to put piece to add in there. And you look at some player longest receptions that you could add in your same game parlay as well. Over under for Jameson Williams is 22.5. Sam Laporta is 18.5, and Amon-Ra St. Brown's is 21.5. So if you wanted to add that in your parlay, it's a pretty good one to do. But I do like the matchup of the Detroit Lions and JMO getting open with the split high safeties, especially over the middle. We've seen what he did in the Seattle game where they had two split high safeties. What Ben Johnson did is he sent JMO over the middle. It was a clear and concise pass, and JMO took that the distance. JMO doesn't need much room to make a move and make a touchdown happen. He's too fast. He's too skilled. And if they want to play that split high safety like they usually do in Minnesota, he can make them pay. The only issue here that you're going to see with this whole passing game is they like the blitz, which we've seen that, Jared Goff is pretty damn good against the blitz this year. I was reading something earlier where I'm going to pull it up, but he was just very good against the blitz. And that's what you want to see from your quarterback, especially when you're playing a team like the Vikings. I'm trying to pull it up right now. I think I had it on my Twitter, so let me pull it up. I'm losing people. Okay, this is it. It's per Next Gen Stats. This is a stat. The Vikings that played split high safety coverage on a league high 56.1% of their things. Jared Goff has completed 7 to 9 passes for 154 yards. He's actually been better against the blitz than he has been kept clean, which is very, very interesting from the Jared Goff perspective, because we always think of Jared Goff and we think about he's not good against pressure. Well, the one thing that I've seen from this whole thing is he's better at pressure than most people realize. So if Brian Flores wants to fight fire with fire, it's going to be a long day for him, because Jared Goff likes to, when you give Jared Goff more room to get to his receivers, more room to do that, it ain't going to be easy. And when you look at Jahmyr Gibbs and Dave Montgomery, like you look at these two guys, they're also going to be a key into the fire too, because when you talk about this team, the Detroit Lions, and you think about what are they good at? Well, obviously they're good at running the ball. They can run at the ball, and that could also be the best defense. We talk about Hutchinson being out. We talk about the defense maybe taking a step back. The one thing that's good for a bad defense, which I don't think Detroit is, but the one thing that can help a defense out is staying on the field. And I think this Detroit Lions team can stay on the field and get some points, and they can take time of possession. When we watched the New England Patriots for years, they weren't the most talented team on the defensive side of the ball, but the one thing that they did correctly, and Matt Patricia was here for a little bit of short time, but before he completely fell off the mat, the one thing that Matt Patricia did pretty well is he loved to win time of possession. And when they didn't win time of possession because their defense was trash, which was Matt Patricia's defense, it kind of sucked them in. And so when you watch the Patriots, when you watch some of these teams that are not really skilled defensively, they want to win time of possession. And when we look at Detroit and their time of possession, it's pretty damn good. They've averaged about 27 to 28 minutes a game. And when you're doing that, you're going to win a lot of football games. So that's what is good about this Detroit Lions team. So there's a lot to like about this team. And then, it's just when you look at these two teams, the Minnesota Vikings, when you look at the Detroit Lions, there's a lot of things that you like to see. Obviously Minnesota with obviously a Sam Darnold statistic that I showed earlier, but you don't need to pressure Sam Darnold this week. No blitz. Look at these statistics. I mean, 20th in the NFL in passer rating, 22nd in yards per attempt. Completion percentage is 31.5. EPA per dropback is 28th in the league. 5th most quarterback pressure percentage. Sacks per game is 2nd most. Average separation is 2nd least, I believe. But Sam Darnold has thrown an interception in 4 or 5 games. So just let Sam Darnold sit back there, let him kind of deal with it, Let him not scan the field. You got two guys in Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph who have been fantastic at patrolling center field. That's what you want to do. So if you are Detroit, if you are, thinking Detroit's going to win, this is the dynamic that they're going to win. When you think about all they have to do Sunday is not pressure Sam Darnold with the blitz, and then if they pressure him, if they allow him to sit back there, he's going to make an interception to these two guys, because there has been no point in the season for Sam Darnold where he has sat back there and made the correct throws. That's the one thing that we know about Sam Darnold. So the betting markets are telling you that Detroit has a really good shot. So I mean, I like I said earlier, if you do want the juice, I suggest you go bet. If you're gonna go bet, I suggest you go take Detroit Lions on the money line right now, because it's at plus 108. I believe a couple days ago it was at plus 115, so it's been going down significantly. And talking to some of the people that I know, the Detroit Lions are one of the most betted on teams in Vegas in terms of the spread and the money line, and a lot of people like the over. So this game really, we talked about the loss of Hutchinson. That does suck, but the thing about it is you're going to get to know what you have in the next two games with the quarterbacks that you play. Obviously, the Minnesota Vikings are way better than the Tennessee Titans. There's no doubt about that. And Will Levis is ass. So Sam Darnold will make mistakes, so you just got to wait it out a little bit. We got a comment here from Aaron. Aaron, and she says, I think they need to pressure him to win. I think they need to pressure him. And here's the thing: if they do go pressure him, like I said, you could do that in a four-man rush. When you blitz him, I think his numbers go significantly up. So when you look at like the statistics, like when he's not blitzed, this is when he's not blitzed. It's not pretty. It's not really pretty when you look at the statistics of when he's not blitzed. I think you got to play into that thing, because what I think happens with Sam Darnold, and I'm not entirely clear on why he struggles with no blitz. Usually it's the opposite, but we have seen it with Jared Goff in the past few years. Is sometimes when you're sitting back there and you're waiting all day and you're allowing plays to develop, these safeties are so good in the NFL that they can kind of read your eyes, and once they read your eyes, it's kind of over. Like once they read that you're going to this guy, it's over. Once they read that you're going to Justin Jefferson, it's over. That's what I think. Like I don't think that the Vikings have played some great defenses along the lines. I mean, the Giants were not good. The 49ers, their defense has kind of fallen off the wayside in terms of the way that they've been playing lately. But they haven't really played this amazing defense, and they've had to win a lot of games scoring some high scores. I mean, 23, 31, 34, 30, 23, 28. I mean, when you play the Giants and you allow them to score 6 points, I mean, the Giants are anemic offensively, so it really don't matter. And the Texans went in there and they got housed. And one of the reasons they got housed was because I really don't think CJ Stroud had 2 interceptions in that game. Their leading rusher, who was Cam Akers, had 21 yards rushing on 9 carries. Not really going to win you any ball games, but that's what has to happen for the Detroit Lions, especially Sunday. Got to run the ball. Got to be able to do play action. You know that Brian Flores he's gonna blitz Jared Goff at whatever rate, and that you're gonna deal with that. There's another comment. They do need to put some pressure on him. I agree with you. They do need to put some pressure on him. I think they could do it with a 4-man front. Obviously, they will send blitzes, but when you look at the statistic of him with no blitz, you kind of have to buy into that. You kind of have to go, okay, why does he do this? And obviously, if you watch some film, which I have, one of the issues that Sam Darnold has, and I was very intrigued by this because usually you don't see this by a veteran quarterback. One of the issues that he has is that he'll sit back there sometimes. He'll look over the whole defense, and then he'll just throw a ball up to Justin Jefferson. Now that does work for most quarterbacks. We saw for years, Matthew Stafford threw it up to Calvin Johnson. It worked. But honestly, it doesn't work a lot, especially with these safeties now coming in from college football. they're more adapted to, you know, ball hawking abilities. You see it all over the SEC, the Big Ten. You see it all over college football in general. And I think that Sam Darnold sometimes he gets baited into throwing interceptions. That's my opinion. Just by watching some of the games that I've watched. I watched the Giants game. That was a no brainer. The Vikings were way better talent wise in terms of who they were playing. The Giants, the Texans game, they couldn't sustain a drive to save their effing life, and the Vikings they just put it on them. They put it on them really quick. And one of the things that we're gonna have to monitor going into Sunday is the availability of Aaron Jones, but even more the availability of Harrison Phillips, Harrison Phillips is a damn good defensive tackle. He's been very good for Minnesota. One of their best players in terms of the way that he defends the run. But if we're going to be totally, completely honest with each other, Harrison Phillips is like losing Lee McNeil. You lose a piece that part of your defense, it kind of sucks up the run game. And last year we seen when we lost the lean for a little bit of the time, they struggled a little bit to stop the run. Then they started sending blitz, and that really put it to bed. All right, so this has been the Detroit Lions News podcast. Just a short podcast, game preview. We're just doing it all. Obviously we've talked about offense, we've talked about defense, special teams. They got a good kicker in Will Reichert, so that'll be interesting. But all in all, this is a very good game for Detroit. I know there's a lot of pundits that are picking the Vikings, especially NFL, the NFL or whatever, the NFL.com, they were picking they're picking the Vikings, but this is a good chance for the Detroit Lions to kind of get a win. They have to get a win here, in my opinion. When you look at the Vikings schedules, it really sets up to the Vikings really making a run here, and because their schedule is ass after the Detroit Lions game, and then then at the back end of their schedule they play some good teams, but it's not like they have some overly good teams that they're going to be playing. So we'll talk to you next on the Detroit Lions News podcast. This has been a game preview on the Detroit Lions News podcast. If you missed any portion of the episode, you can go on the you can follow the podcast anywhere just by scanning this QR code, and you could get to the podcast, download it on Apple's, iTunes. You could do it all, and we'll talk about that more on the Detroit Lions News podcast post game as we talk more Detroit Lions football on the Detroit Lions News podcast. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you in the next podcast.